Isaiah chapter 2. Nations will be rebuked by the Messiah himself, and as a result, they'll take their swords and spears. A nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn of war anymore. Think about where we are right now. There's a war going on in Ukraine. That means the Messiah isn't here.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And joining me again is one of the crowd favorites, one of the Patreon most requested, Rabbi Tovia Singer. Always a blast to have you on, and we've had some great videos with you so far, and we just want to keep digging into this. And we're going to start off with the question I get from a lot of people is, the messianic promise is all fulfilled in the New Testament. It's so clear. What do you mean? How do you not see it? It's all in the New Testament. And it's like, wait, you're saying the New Testament proves the New Testament? But wait a minute. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back in time. Let's see what the messianic promise really was. Who was the Messiah supposed to be? Is he supposed to be God himself? Is he something else? I'm not even going to say anything else. I'm just going to let you tell us the messianic promise, who's the Messiah and what is he supposed to do?
So I'm going to approach this in a way that I've never done before. And I'm going to approach it starting from a very strange path of Paul. Paul portrays the Christian Messiah, Jesus, as a grand mystery. And people, I think, don't ask this question of why is Paul constantly saying that there's a grand mystery going on in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 3, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. There's a phenomenal mystery. The whole mystery of Christ is something that's so secret that if the rulers of the epoch had even known the mystery, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory. What is he talking about? That means in Tanakh, we don't have anything about mysteries. In Tanakh, it's very clear what the Messiah is supposed to be. Think about this. I don't know if I'm sure someone else must have thought about this. I think about this a lot. Why is Paul, so we're going at this in a completely different angle. Why is Paul appealing to a personal revelation? Like, why did he need a personal revelation on the road to Damascus? Why do you need that for? Why can't the Messiah come and you just know it? Why is Paul saying that what he has as revelation is superior to anyone else in Galatians 1 and 2 and Philippians chapter 3? It's all over Paul's writing that he has a unique revelation and it's superior to all others because it's directly from Jesus Christ. He didn't get what he got from Jerusalem. What is he talking about? Why does he need to do this? The reason is something you kind of alluded to in the introduction, and that is that nothing of what Jesus does in the Christian Bible is what the Messiah is supposed to do. And therefore you have to say this whole thing's a mystery. See, Christianity is the motherlode of mystery religions, and you need special knowledge, hence gnosis. You know, when people think that sort of Gnostic Christianity began in the 2nd century, that's a mistake. Right. Of course, the iteration of Gnostic Christianity that we are familiar with through the patristic fathers is one that they were managing in the 2nd and 3rd century and confronting and heading off. But in reality, Paul is the motherlode of the mystery religions. Why? Because he's saying there's some grand mystery that I have privy to, and listen to my version of Christology, not you foolish Galatians, the Christology that's coming from fellow believers. Paul is fighting with fellow believers. So let's add this all up. Why do people have to say, when you talk to Christians, the Lord spoke to me? You know, the Lord laid it on my heart. Like, why do I need that for? And what happens if the Lord didn't lay anything on my heart? That means I can't go to heaven. I can't be saved. Like, salvation is only for people who have high IQs with PhDs who talk themselves and speak in gibberish. So let's talk serious. The reason why Paul must appeal to some mystery throughout, and this is almost unique to Paul, in the Christian Bible, the idea that there's a mystery, setting aside the book of Revelation, it's all Paul. All of it is. Ephesians, Corinthians, all over the place. Why? Here's the answer. Because Tanakh is very plain. The Hebrew Bible is very clear about what will happen in the final redemptive process with the heir of David. God made a promise to King David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16, that out of you will come along a dynasty that will never end, will go on forever. And here is what is going to occur. Isaiah chapter 2. Nations will be rebuked by the Messiah himself. And as a result, they'll take their swords and spears, implements of war, turn them into plowshares and pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn of war anymore. Think about where we are right now. There's
Ah,
a war. There's a war going on in Ukraine. That means the Messiah isn't here. Right now.
it's
It's
over.
just it's simple. It's so simple.
We're done here.
That's it. The animals, predators will lie with prey together. Isaiah chapter 11. And this is explicit. I know you, the viewer, may not be a believer, or many of you do believe. Whatever your faith is clear to any person what these passages are conveying. The prophets are conveying that there will be a worldwide peace, that in fact he will speak peace to the nations. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 10. The Christians all know Zechariah 9:9 because that comes to the triumphal entry in the Gospels, but they don't know Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. This is a big problem, my friends. So there'll be a universal knowledge of God. The knowledge of God will cover the world as the water covers the sea. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9. Book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 14. You follow, everyone will know, from the least of them to the greatest of them, says the Lord. Jeremiah chapter 31. The building of the temple. There's a destroyed temple that must be rebuilt. In fact, in a strange way, I don't know if I ever said this, but the Messiah has to come when there is no temple. Because if one of the things that the Messiah does is bring about the building of a third temple, which is described explicitly in the last three passages of Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel 41 through 48 is all about this temple. So the Messiah is coming when there isn't a temple. That means Jesus just came at the wrong time. I mean, just forget, there's this Messiah doesn't come while a temple is standing. Messiah comes once a temple is destroyed. That can trigger, and then you can build something that has been destroyed. Elijah the prophet, ushering in that great day of the Lord. That's how the prophets end in the book of Malachi. It's the last handful of verses. So these are the critical events: the resurrection of the dead, Daniel 12:2, Isaiah 26, verse 19. This is why there is this constant appeal to personal revelation and competition among the early Christians of who had personal revelation. I mean, Tertullian, you and I know him as a fairly early church father from Carthage, 3rd century. He was born in the 2nd century, who belonged to an iteration of Christianity that was kind of like the charismatic movement that we have today, where they believed in some prophecy, the Montanus, that kind of view that like God is having this ongoing. Why do you need personal ongoing? Why do you need God to speak to you? Well, the reason is because Christianity is doing everything the Messiah is not supposed to do and has done nothing the Messiah is supposed to do. So there has to be some kind of secret, mysterious fulfillment plan that only is known to people who have special knowledge, who understand the mystery. And Paul's always saying, you guys don't know the mystery. You can't be saved. Here it is. That's what's really going on.
Wow. Now, I know so and I think one of their solutions to this was to sort of invent this idea of a second coming.
Of course.
And that way they can sort of sweep all this under the rug and say, "Oh yeah, all that stuff that they promised, that's the second coming. The first coming, this is what happened. But
Right.
all the stuff that you're talking about, that's the
Right.
second coming."
I want to just unpack that one piece. Now, while a second coming effectively explains away any false Messiah, I mean, if there's a second coming, then my sister-in-law could be the Messiah. She didn't fulfill anything. She'll do it in a second coming. I mean, that's the whole reason why someone has to invent a second coming is because it didn't happen, because it failed. Then who then can't be the Messiah? Then anyone can be the Messiah. Then anybody who claimed to be Messiah in history, and there were many people who did, can be the Messiah, but they just accomplished it in the second coming. I mean, the point of the Hebrew Bible is that everyone gets it, everyone knows, and that it's falsifiable. That's the key point of it. But I want to take this deeper than I've ever taken this with an audience. I don't. All right, let me do this here. I want to sort of amp this up because I want people to get this. Christians would say that, look, it's not like Jesus did nothing. Listen very carefully. He did do many things. He rode into Jerusalem on a donkey or two, depending if you believe Luke, Mark / or Matthew. Um, he was born of a virgin, and he was born in Bethlehem, right? Those are fulfillments, right? And he came out of Egypt, fulfilling prophecy. So here's what Christians would say. I want to present this in a way that's really unique and novel, and people will get what's happening here. People will get the magic show that we're watching, pun intended. Christians actually would convey it in the following way. There are two categories of messianic prophecy that could be divided in the following way. There's category number one, which are those prophecies that Jesus already fulfilled. I've heard one Christian say, you're buying a house, it's like the down payment, and you got to pay off the house. So, category number one are those prophecies, manifold prophecies that have been fulfilled, and you'll find them all over the New Testament. I want to ignore for a moment the veracity of those prophecies. If I just want to ignore all that. Okay. And then they'll say there's a whole bunch of other prophecies, because everything I'm telling you, Christians will agree on messianic prophecies. I mean, Isaiah 11, Ezekiel 37, these are pregnant with messianic prophecies.
Right.
All right. So they'll say those are messianic for sure, but that's category two. Those are the ones that Christ will fulfill in his second coming. Okay, got it? Now listen, think about this very. Is it just a coincidence that all the prophecies that Jesus allegedly fulfilled are not exhaustive and exclusive and are not falsifiable? By sheer coincidence,
Right.
let's say for a moment that Jesus never rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's possible. Let's just say for a moment, consider the possibility that Jesus was not born to a virgin. Unlikely, perhaps, but it's possible that Jesus' mother wasn't a virgin, right? That would not be unprecedented. I hope this is not too complicated for anyone. Let's say Jesus was not born. I mean, after all, let's say he wasn't born in Bethlehem. Possible, right? The point is, would we know it today? No, we'd have no access to that information. We can't dig up the records on the babies born in Bethlehem in the year 6 BCE or whatever in the year one. We can't dig it there. It's not accessible. Can we see if Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, which would mean that's the way people moved around a lot. But would we know it if he wasn't? If he wasn't, but we'd have no access to any of that information. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, let's just say he didn't. I know it's a stretch. I'm reaching, but it's possible he didn't. Would we know about it today? The answer is no. The nature of messianic prophecies is that they're exhaustive and exclusive, which means when they actually occur, everyone will know it. That's the key point of it. So therefore, think about all the things that somehow wind up in category number two. All the messianic prophecies, the ingathering exile, all the Jews return back to the land of Israel, which falls into an independent state under the governance of a man from the house of David, the temple rebuilt in Jerusalem. There's a worldwide peace and a universal knowledge of God and the resurrection of the dead. Well, let me tell you, when it happens, I hope, as a Jew, I hope it'll happen soon. This is probably what's going to happen. People are going to, your wife is going to look out the window and go, honey, he's here. Which means that that's the whole beauty. The beauty of messianic prophecy is that there's no other way to interpret it. It's so clear. It's so crystal clear. There's no need for mysteries and personal revelation. That means messianic prophecies are already front loaded, pre programmed, set up deliberately so that no one needs personal revelation. That's the whole point of it. The whole point of it is that everyone will get it.
Wow.
That means whether you're an atheist or not, it doesn't make a difference, but everyone agrees that when those events occur, everyone knows it, everyone gets it. That's the point. The point is it doesn't require personal revelation. Or else why didn't people in the Korean Peninsula have the personal revelation? Why does one guy from Tarsus or wherever he came from, he gets this on the road to Damascus, but no one else did. And other people who apparently met Jesus during their lifetime, they don't even understand it. And Peter was a big hypocrite in Galatians 2:11.
Right.
That's the whole point of the mystery talk that we find all over Paul's letters, especially Ephesians 3, especially 1 Corinthians chapter 2. That's the key point of it. And that's what the Messiah is supposed to do.
Wow, that brings me then to the next thing I was going to say is that you get this sort of progression of unfolding of who this guy was. And it seems like, for me personally, I think it's responding to the criticisms. So, for example, I'll just give you one example. When the first gospel, when Paul's writing his letters, and there's probably maybe there's some Q document or something, who knows? Mark gets written. When all that stuff's out there, there probably was devout Jews that were like, wait a minute. First of all, he's supposed to be from the line of David. That's not in there. Second of all, he's supposed to be from Bethlehem. He's from Nazareth. None of this adds up. So then you get Luke and Matthew, and they fix all this stuff. All of a sudden, you get these genealogies. Oh yeah, we trace his genealogy all the way back to David. We have it all here. Oh by the way, the Nazareth thing. He went down to Bethlehem for a stay and stayed at, and then he was born there. That's what happened. Forget about what Mark told you. And then you have this whole thing where Matthew and Luke, their genealogies aren't lined up. So the church says, well, one of them is from Mary, one of them for Joseph. But that's not what it says. They both say Joseph. So they contradict each other. And I want to get your thoughts on this, but real quick, I just want to say this. If he really was from the line of David, don't you think he would be more, people would know? Why would he be some poor guy living up in Nazareth? Don't you think he would be like somewhere in like Jerusalem, like kind of wealthy? People would know who he is, and he wouldn't just be some random guy from all the way near Syria. What do you think about that?
I want to attack this from a different angle. I think this will be edifying for people. Christians have challenged me on this very point, asking the following. So when your Messiah comes, you, Tovia the Jew, I didn't mean that to rhyme, it just happened. All right. So when your Messiah come, like, how will you know these from the house of David? People are like, how will you know? We have these genealogies in Matthew 1 and Luke 3. All right. So this is really misunderstood. It's not like, imagine for a moment there is suddenly world peace because this man will rebuke the nations, and all the implements of war will become implements of agriculture. There will be a ingathering of the Jews to the land of Israel, building of the temple, and Elijah the prophet ushers this in, and the resurrection of the dead, and then people go, hold on, buddy, not so fast. Let me see your identification. Well, you won't need it at that point. The Messiah is going to be a male. Well, you don't need an ID to say that he's a male. You don't need an ID that he's from the house of David. These are facts about the Messiah, but that's not how you know. The way you know is because the events that are supposed to occur in the Messianic age unfold. Now, you alluded to, well, you quite directly, to the problems that the church brought upon itself as it developed and unfolded. And I like what you said. I think it was intentional. You talked about Paul's letters, the Q source, the Q that are more than 200 passages that are common to Matthew and Luke, but don't appear in the book of Mark, likely older than the book of Mark, maybe older than Paul's letters. And then you have Matthew and Luke that are further embellished than Mark. And the reason why this is a very important trajectory is because the passages that are in common to Matthew and Luke, but appear nowhere in the book of Mark, Jesus is a teacher, not a miracle worker, likely much more primitive, right? The miracle stuff is in Matthew and Luke. You have all that stuff, but is also in Mark. So that's the key. The key is the church develops. And as Mark Twain said, if you're a liar, you got problems. You got to keep track of everything. But if you're telling the truth, you really don't have to be that knowledgeable. Why? Because you don't have to keep track of everything. So what happens is, as the church begins to collect all the ideas that flourished in the Greco-Roman world, the idea that the gods, who were both mortal and divine, were born to virgins. So once that was adopted in the 80s, it makes it into Matthew and Luke. So that sabotages the claim to Jesus being the Messiah, because in order to be the Messiah, you have to come from the house of David, from the tribe of Judah. And as it turns out, the only way that tribe identity can be conferred, is through a patrilineal line. How do you know? It says so very openly in the book of Numbers, chapter 1, right there, Lemishpachaisam Leveisavoisam, Numbers chapter 1, verse 18. It's very explicitly there. So Joseph, therefore, according to Matthew and Luke, are providing for us a genealogy of Joseph, a putative genealogy of Joseph, not the genealogy of Jesus, because Joseph then was not the father of Jesus. So collapses on itself.
It's so funny.
Right.
No, that's such a good point because, like, even at that point, they're claiming he's not even has nothing to do with Joseph.
That's
So
right.
why would that even it's through adoption that matters all of a sudden? And that's
Well,
just
hold on for adoption. I'm doing this because people mess up on this. They say, "Well, Joseph adopted him somehow," even though this is not. In order, there are many viewers listening to my voice and yours right now who are adopted. Okay, so let's think about this for a moment. So adoption cannot confer tribe identity, but I want to attack this from another angle. I want people to really. This is really very simple. If you're watching this show now and you are adopted, two things had to happen in order for that to occur. Number one, whoever your biological parents are, they had to have given you up for adoption. And then your parents have to have adopted you. It requires two parts to that. To that change, creating an adoption. If Jesus was adopted, who gave him up for adoption? God? Like the story, it's silly. Like God gave Jesus up for adoption. The whole thing is very, very silly. What
right.
really is occurring here is people are just getting themselves into trouble, as you and I would. If we tried to sneak into a country by using a false passport, we'd get us and try to keep track of all our lives. And this is why James Bond is such a genius. And the reason why we marvel when we watch because James Bond is like lying through his teeth and just keeps track of everything somehow. But it's a movie, it's Hollywood, you could do anything. But in real life, it doesn't work. And that's what happened to the church. In a sense, it just kept making stuff up. It didn't really make anything up. What it kept doing is borrowing, inculcating ideas from the Greco-Roman world, from the pagan world, not just from the East, but also from Egypt, and just reinventing it as the Greeks did. But then it's those new ideas sabotage old ideas. That's why the doctrine of the Trinity, which is adopted in the, let's say, second, third, certainly becomes official in the fourth century, undermines all the subordinate texts in the New Testament where Jesus says the Father is greater than I am. Well, how does that work with doctrine of Trinity? It doesn't. So they keep making it up, but sabotaging everything they did. And what does the church have to do eventually? Some guy has to make up First John chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. And initially that was done in Latin, and that makes it into the Latin New Testaments. And eventually Erasmus is essentially forced to put it into the first publication of the Greek New Testament in the 16th century. So that's it. When you make stuff up, you then got to insert stuff. You got to play with the manuscripts. You got to alter them. You got to be shuffling stuff. It's always a false deal.
Yeah, now I wanna ask you about this thing that Matthew tries to pull off, where he says, "Oh, by the way, there was a prophecy," and by the way, we don't as far as I know, there's nothing I've looked the Old Testament, I've looked through all the manuscripts, all the scrolls and everything. I never found this before. I don't know if you have or anyone has, but it's Matthew says, "Oh, yeah, it says that he will be called a Nazarene." Some sort of prophecy about that. Is
Right.
does that even exist? Is that even
No,
okay,
no, it's made up. It's phantom. It's as kosher as First Corinthians chapter 15, verse 3 and 4. There's no verse about anyone rising from the dead on the third day, and there's nothing about. In fact, it's interesting that John MacArthur, in his commentary, he says that it says to fulfill what the prophet said. He said, "Well, they said it, but it just wasn't recorded in the Hebrew Bible." Right? It doesn't exist. But it's very clear that Nazareth's really important because it's so important. Not only is Jesus called Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of Bethlehem, but you see how hard Matthew and Luke are, how hard they're working to get Jesus to be born in Bethlehem, and they use two different convoluted plot devices to make that possible that have
yeah,
that contradict each other. So so Nazareth is really important because they're like, why not just have Jesus born in Bethlehem and have him live in Bethlehem? Why do you need Nazareth? Why
right,
not dump Nazareth? Like what?
and
But yes,
what's
that's invented.
what's interesting about that is when you the earliest source we have of Nazareth or anything related to Nazareth, it comes from Pliny the Elder.
Right.
It's like the late 70s. So this is already a whole generation later. But he calls it something different. He calls it the Tetrarchy of the Nazarenes. And he says it's in Kol Syria. He didn't say Israel. He doesn't say, he says it's in Kol Syria. He literally tells you where it is. He also
It-
doesn't know who Jesus is. He never mentions Jesus once.
right.
Doesn't even know who
Right.
he is. And that's all the way in the late 70s.
Right.
Which
So
is kind of like if this guy was really out there pulling miracles left and right, you would think someone like Pliny the Elder would add him in his encyclopedia, but he doesn't.
right.
That
Right.
tells you a lot right there. That to me, that was actually one of the most shocking, revealing things I had. when I found that out. I was like, wait a minute, Pliny the Elder doesn't even know who he. Whoa, take a step back here. But anyway, that's a whole other topic because I wanted to ask you about this Zechariah thing, where the Zechariah has this sort of passage about this high priest named Jesus or Yeshua and the governor Zerubbabel. They're coming back from Babylon, building the new temple, and he calls them the two chosen, anointed, whatever it is. I know that the Greek's different than the Hebrew, so I want to get your thoughts on what this is and what this means messianic wise.
So there is a messianic prophecy, but the key point is that Zechariah is telling us that in the final redemptive process, there will be two houses. Now, I just want to hone in on Zechariah. What's going on at the time of Zechariah is it's the Persian Empire. He's only one of three prophets who lived during this very end of the prophetic period, him, Haggai, and Malachi. And what's going on, there are two leaders among the Jewish people. One of them is Yehoshua ben Yehotzadok, and he is the high priest, the nephew of Ezra, as it turns out. And you have a man named Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is from the Davidic dynasty, he's from the Davidic house. And these are the two leaders. So you have the person who's high priest and leader. Zerubbabel never becomes king, but he's kind of a governor. And the key that Zechariah is conveying that one day in the future there will be the branch, and you'll have two thrones set up. One of them reserved for the king, from where he will rule, and the other for the high priest. And then Zechariah tells us, and there will be Atzah Shalom, an advisory of peace. There will be peace between the two of them. That means they will get along because in the past, the priesthood, which had a very important spiritual leadership role, conflicted with kings. In fact, we had a king like Saul who killed a whole bunch of priests. So they didn't get along very frequently. Two power sources, one centered in the temple, one of them centered in the governance of the whole land. So if there'll be a governance of peace between them, well, according to Christianity, Jesus is both king and priest. It's the same person. Does mean the person suffers from multiple personality disorder? But this is where, again, Christianity gets itself into trouble because you have a book like the Hebrews that's seeking to convey that Jesus is everything. He's higher than the angels. He's higher than Moses, higher than
Right.
Joshua. He's high. And he is the high priest, according to the order of Melchizedek. So, and he's king. And he explains he's not a priest according to the Aaronic line, which I'm from, but according to the line of Melchizedek, well, who has no father or mother, apparently. So this is all so ridiculous. Like, who is Pharaoh's mother and father? I don't. You'll ask me. I'll explain this further. The point is, this is Hebrews. Hebrews is Paul amped up. It's Pauline, but way amped up, far more sophisticated than Paul, and very, very cogently set out.
Yeah.
And so that's where it comes from. So Christians are anchored, are stuck. As a Muslim scholar once said, they're stuck with the Hebrew Bible. And as a result of that, they can't get out of this because it can't be, there'll be peace between the priesthood and between the king. Because if you're saying it's the same person, what are you talking about? Why are there sacrifices coming back? Every Christian has to answer this question. Why is the third temple going to have a sacrificial system? It's clearly there. Why is the Messiah himself, who's called the Prince, going to bring a sin offering on behalf of himself and the nation? Why? Why is he going to do that? It means if Jesus is the final sacrifice, see, nothing works. This is the deal. The deal is that the moment you alter something in the algebraic equation, the whole thing collapses. Why would the prince be bringing a bull for a sin offering in Ezekiel 45, verse 20 and 22? Please look it up for yourself. Please don't take my word for it. This is the Messianic age. This is where all the 12 tribes are back, which is a part of the Messianic prophecy. According to the Christian, this is so problematic. For those of you who were Christians, you understand the problem. Number one, the Christian Bible says there will be no longer an animal sacrificial system. Romans 6, Hebrews 10, 10 verse 18. It just can't be. Number two is the Messiah, according to Christianity, is supposed to be sinless. And I don't know why this is a big deal to be sinless if you're God. Like what's the temptation? What exactly is the temptation? I mean, Jesus was led into the wilderness and tempted, but what does that mean?
this is where it all falls apart, because he's a man who, by the way, when he gets baptized, he repents his sins. What sins? He's God. How can he
Right.
have sins? He's
Right.
he's his blood. He's a flesh and blood guy who dies on the cross. Wait a minute. Wouldn't if he's God, he's eternal, then this is all just a pre-planned thing. He didn't suffer anything. He didn't sacrifice anything. He's up in heaven now. He just played an act for us. So this to me is like this to me, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, because I think this is all coming out of the mystery religion. This is all Greco-Roman stuff infiltrating this Jewish cult, whatever you want to call it, these Christian Nazarenes, whatever the hell they are. And but what's even, you mentioned earlier, the 3-day motif has nothing to do with anything. It's nowhere in the Old Testament. But where you do find a 3-day motif is the Addis day of blood, 3 days later, the day of washing. You have Inanna and Ishtar descending in the underworld, getting pinned by a nail to a wall, to wood, for 3 days, and then resurrecting with the dead and bringing up the dead on the spring equinox. So all of these motifs play into the Christianity, have nothing to do with the Old Testament.
Right. I love Chinese food, and I have a feeling it's possible that you do too.
Yes.
All right. All right. Like, who doesn't? We thank God for the Chinese people. All right. Thank you, Lord, for the Chinese. Okay. So, what the difficulty when going to a Chinese restaurant is that you just don't even know what to order because it all looks so good. Like,
Yeah.
it's all great. Like, you could just close your eye and just put your finger somewhere, and I'll take it, and it's going to be great. Right? Right? Like, who doesn't like Chinese food? All right. But so actually, Chinese restaurants, I remember as a kid, the Chinese restaurants had a solution to this, and that was you got a poo-poo platter. I don't know if they have that in
Yeah.
non-kosher restaurants. Okay, so poo-poo platter, the point is that you just get a little of everything, and they actually bring it out to you on like almost an altar. There's a fire in the middle, and you bring sacrifice in the middle of a Chinese restaurant. But the
Wow.
point is a little of everything for anybody. So you got the egg rolls, and you got the beef and chicken, and the whole thing is all there. That's what Christianity is. When Justin, in his apologetic work, was confronting pagans, which is part most of what he did, not all. He confronted Jews as well, but pagans. He said, "What is your problem? We're these all beliefs. You believe things just like it, as fantastic as this." And he was being quite accurate. What Christianity is select this, select that. And I'll add this just a further for you. It's so interesting when you travel outside of the West. It means you're not in the United States anymore, but you visit Brazil, as an example. I've lectured in Sao Paulo and Rio, in Mexico. Roman Catholicism is way amped up there than it is in Washington State, and there's many more statues and saints and candles, and just it's why? Because they like it there. Why? Because it matches well with the indigenous people who are there. So what the Roman Catholic Church, we could observe this today. The Roman Catholic Church is the worship is unique to each different nations with different cultures. Why? Because what they've done is in Mexico, they've adopted the pagan beliefs that the people of those lands already believed, inculcated them, and that's why it's really different. Whereas in the United States, it's really kind of washed down and it's more clean, it's more Western. And in South America, it's like, holy smokes, everyone's just praying to Mary and bowing out the statues they never heard of and lighting candles all over the place. That's what happens. So Christianity just evolved. You want it, we'll bring it to you. You want to worship Mary because you need another intermediary, and Jesus is not the only intermediary? Fine, we'll bring her in. You want saints too, we'll bring it in. It's keep placing these intermediaries between the God and man. And now in Timothy, it's Jesus Christ. And the Catholic Church, well, we'll give you more, as many as you want. And once again, Christianity invents nothing, it borrows everything. Rome did not convert to Christianity. Get that out of your mind. It's Christianity that converted to Rome.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And so I'm now I want to ask you about you when the Septuagint gets created, whatever the story is. I know it's some magical story that Josephus tells us that 72 men did this magical thing and they all converted the same words into Greek, blah blah blah, whatever. But what happens after that though? Second century BCE, first century BC, somewhere around there, you get these Hellenized Egyptian Alexandrian Jews who they're basically Greeks, but they're like into the Septuagint. You get people like Aristobulus of Alexandria who says
Sure.
Aristotle's so great. Look how great the Platonic philosophy is. Philo is a prime example of this. And he
Sure.
starts. What is your thoughts on people like that? Because their theology obviously is powered by the Christians. Obviously, what do you think
Right.
about people like that?
So they naturally assimilated. It is uncontroversial that Alexander the Great was the most important figure in Western civilization. And the Greek language had spread. Hellenization. So, what is Hell? That means being Greek. Helen is the name of a Greek god, happens to be a male, not a female. But the point is, Greek spreads, and Jews who are in the empire, it doesn't only have to be in the areas you've mentioned, but also in Africa, are already speaking Greek and adopting Greek thought. You mentioned Philo. Holy smokes, Philo was born in the year 20 BC. He died in the 50s, around the time Paul's writing his letters.
Right.
Philo was smack right there when Christianity emerged. Philo,
Never
you know,
mentions Jesus once.
no, and Philo writes a lot. If someone sneezed, another guy said Gesundheit,
He would say
Philo recorded it. And
right.
Philo was in Israel. Although he was from Alexandria, he frequently was here in the land of
Oh
Israel.
yeah, he talks about it. Yep.
Right. So he was here, and somehow the graves opening up, somehow, and dead people walking around
Which, by the
introducing
way,
themselves.
something you get from Virgil when he talks about how when Caesar died, graves opened up, the sky turned black, the moon turned red. That's weird. That sounds like the same story. Anyways,
I want to, Neil, I just want to share this weird thought with you. I've had this thought, and I never shared it with anyone.
sure.
There are Christian scholars. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to insult people, but there are Christian scholars who really are believers, who really are devout Christians, and they don't believe that one, or they have trouble when you ask them about it. Right? When you ask them about the zombie apocalypse, so then they go, that may be some, and I don't know why they have trouble with that. That means, why would this be a big magic? Like, why would that be more difficult than Lazarus and Jesus? I mean, why is that a bigger deal?
Hey,
Somehow it's so loaded front end with mythology that people just gag on it. They just gag on that one in Matthew's passion narrative, and they obviously wonder why the other three don't have it. But it's interesting that Christian scholars very frequently, who are believers, go, well, not that one. That one I can't swallow that one. Interesting.
yeah,
No,
yeah, and I think it's because it's such a. First of all, for only one of them to record this was like, wait, this is such a big thing. They all should remember. And in fact, I think is it Matthew's gospel that does the
that's
story?
right. Only Matthew.
And Matthew even says everyone saw it and everyone was amazed.
That
If
was the whole point. They
everyone
agreed
saw
on
it,
it.
if
Right.
everyone saw it, everyone was there would be nobody left who's not a Christian. Zero. There would be no one left. Why would you? It's like it's like standing in front of a cliff. Are you gonna walk off the cliff and die? No. You're gonna do what naturally is survival. And if you know Christianity is true, you're not gonna reject it. So
Right.
the fact that anybody is not a Christian after that event is mind blowing, which kind of tells you what happened, right?
Right. And it is also striking that in the Gospels, Jesus' post resurrection appearances, obviously Matthew, Luke, and John, Mark doesn't have any post, are all to people who already believe this stuff. Like, if you're Jesus and you want to convince people, why don't you just like go to the Sanhedrin and say, "Hi, everybody, I'm here." I mean, that's very strange. Let me phrase this a
That's a
little in a
good point.
way that we can relate to this. I'm not being naughty here,
That's a
but
good point, though.
of course. I mean, I lived in the Far East. I served as rabbi of Indonesia for 5 years. Okay. So I was all over the Far East serving as rabbi in different communities. One of the things very striking is that in the Philippines, Mary, the Virgin Mary, was appearing, having breakfast, having pancakes with ladies all the time, every Sunday morning. That was a very big deal. Like in the Philippines, same thing in Brazil. People are seeing the Virgin Mary all over the place, right? Like if I were the Virgin Mary and I wanted to like convince people, like why don't they go to Saudi Arabia? She can't get a visa. Like why don't you just go to Kuwait? Like why is she appearing only in places where they're predisposed to believe this? Like why not come to me? Like I would be the guy you'd want to have breakfast with, go chow hi there. It means what? So the point is that she's appearing to people who are already predisposed to believe that kind of stuff. Follow? Like,
Yeah.
why is she, and by the way, it's almost, this is going to be controversial. And I want to say to you, the viewer, don't go off on me on this, okay? But I'm going to say it because, or else Neil will never bring me on again. But it's true. Why is it the people who have these visions of Mary, I mean, these visions of Mary, why are they almost always women if they're adults? Like, why are they 99% of the time women? Like, why? Like, smoke that, put that in your pipe for a moment. I'm just saying, it is. Why? Women are more passionate, more whatever, but they are. So here you go again. And that's what I think. I've spoken about this on other shows. I think, the appearance, sudden appearance of Mary Magdalene all over the passion narratives, where she's almost nowhere anywhere else except for Luke 8. And she's crazy in Luke 8, and Jesus has to cast out demons from her. That's what I think happened. There's no empty tomb. That's all arranged later. And it is some hysterical woman that comes up with this stuff.
Yeah, I don't think, and you might know about this too. You might know about the history of, burials in Jerusalem. But if I'm not mistaken, if some criminal from Nazareth, I'm talking in the eyes of the court of the people in Jerusalem, he comes from Nazareth. They don't know him. He's not from there. He comes to Nazareth. He winds up getting crucified. Are they going to give him a tomb? Isn't that kind of expensive to get a tomb?
It's not, well, the way the Christian Bible attacks that by saying there's actually a rich guy who provides the tomb, or
Right.
otherwise he wouldn't.
Comes
Well,
out of the blue, out of nowhere. Just
right,
yeah,
very conveniently. And, he's got a rich guy. Well, but I can't, attack that. The key point is that people who were crucified, who, besides being the worst possible execution anyone ever came up with, is you were also deprived of a burial.
right.
I mean, the whole point was that after you died, it's not like you got to be buried anywhere. Your body was eaten by vultures. I mean, we have material on this. We were eaten by scavengers, and then your body was tossed away. That's the whole point. And what's very transparent here, guys, listen up very carefully. In Mark and Luke, John repairs this. John has Nicodemus, who I believe is a phantom character that John came up with, but Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, taking care of the spices before Jesus is buried on Friday. Okay, so John locks that one up, but he's correcting for something, and he's correcting for what you find in Luke and what you find in Mark, and that is that women come to anoint. It means, why are they going to the grave Sunday morning? Why? Like, I'm sure you have lost people. You've gone to funerals and burials in your life. Nobody goes back 3 days later. And why'd you go back? Because what?
That
We
is
did
really weird. You're right.
to anoint a body? Why would you anoint? Like, where in the Bible is Jesus anoint bodies or add spices?
That's
Are we
Egyptian.
cooking? Are we cooking chicken soup here, or is this a burial? Like, why do you need spices? Now, this is not out of nowhere. As I said, Christianity didn't invent anything; they borrowed everything. So the problem in the ancient world is no refrigeration. No refrigeration means that the body would smell because decomposition begins immediately. So it was a practice to have very strong spices buried with the body so that during the funeral procession, the body wouldn't smell, which was considered a bizoyan hametz, was considered just not really appropriate, right? But the whole point is to get the body in the grave and have no smell from the body. So that's why spices were put there. They actually had all sorts of methods of different types of spices that would be burnt. The smoke would carry the smell further, so the body would not stink, frankly.
Right.
But why would you, once the body's in the ground or in a tomb, whatever it is, the problem is solved. You don't need to put spices in 3 days. I mean, what
Right.
would a dead body look like?
That is such a good point. Oh my! I
Right.
never thought about that. Now, I just this is totally separate from this, but I just thought about this. This is a big deal. The idea of the Messiah is that he's God's anointed. Can God be God's anointed?
I'll amp that up. We'll go higher. Let's go really high here. Not only that, the Bible explicitly says in Isaiah 11, which is about the Messiah, uncontroversial, that the Messiah will fear God. Please look at Isaiah chapter 11, verse 2 and 3. I mean, literally says he will be filled with the fear of the Lord. And verse 3 is, the King James, I think, has it, he will be quickened in the Jacobean English. He will become quickened in the fear of the Lord. Well, like, people who fear themselves are put away in institutions. I mean, it's very clear that the Messiah fears God. He's not God. God doesn't fear himself. And God does give the Mashiach honor and so on. That's because he doesn't have it. God doesn't have to give God anything. So this is very clear in Tanakh that the Messiah fears God. One other point I should say about the Messiah, this I think everyone will miss. There are hundreds of messianic prophecies contained in hundreds of passages in the Hebrew Bible. No more than a handful of them about the Messiah himself. Almost all of them, not all, but the vast majority of them are about the Messianic age, how the world will be transformed. The Messiah is relatively unimportant in that he's just the fulfillment of a Davidic dynasty, of a Davidic covenant, Davidic promises. That's all he is. In Isaiah 2, those first 5 verses, which are like so famous that they made it onto the Isaiah wall on First Avenue in New York and 42nd Street, the Messiah is only mentioned with 6 Hebrew words that he'll rebuke the nations. That's all. That's all he will do. So if the Christian Bible, conversely, in contrast, is all about Jesus, talking about Jesus, look at Jesus, 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 Jesus. The world transformation, very, very, very little. So that should strike people like, what is this all this Jesus talk when you go into a church, hearing it 400 times? That doesn't match anything that we encounter in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And this idea that it just falls apart. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm not just trying to be like unfair here. Like literally, this doesn't pass logic 101. The Messiah
Let me make it sense to you. Give me a chance to do this.
Sure.
Who's your biggest critic? I'm not talking to you personally. I'm talking to you, the viewer. Look in the mirror, right? I mean, when you've made mistakes in your life, I say to you, the viewer, where was your self-esteem at the time? Probably not very high. Probably the worst decisions you've made in your life is because you felt like you were worthless, and therefore you dated all the wrong people because you didn't think you could do better. So imagine a religion that can say this to you, that in fact I affirm every pain that you have, that you really are a sinner, you really are worthless, and there's nothing you can do to save yourself. And the reason you've messed up in your life is because you're hopeless. You were born in sin. In fact, you were infected by the original sin. But there is one man, he'll never betray you. I know you've been betrayed by others, family members, spouses have betrayed you, but Jesus will never betray you. That's the heroine. That's the heroine. That's where Christianity goes right into the vein. The reason it's not,
that's how I got into it too.
It's not an edible where it takes an hour. It's right in the main. It's right in the vein.
I don't mean to cut you off, but this is the kicker. This is like this whole entire conversation ends here, and it's in the Gospel of Mark, and it says in Mark 10:17, and when he was gone forth into the way, there came one running and kneeled to him and asked, "Good master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says to him, "Why call me good when there is none good but God?" And then he tells him, do the commandments. Don't commit adultery, don't kill, don't steal, don't bear false witness, honor your mother and father. He tells him the 10 commandments and then says, just love God, love your neighbor, and that's how you get to heaven. That's what he literally says. He doesn't say, follow me. He doesn't say, I'm God and do what I say. He doesn't say anything like that. In fact, he says he's not good. He's a human sinner. He needed to be baptized, and there's no one good but God. He literally separates himself from God in that passage. And then that's when the new gospels come along and have to fix that, because it's such a grave error, because they want to make him like a mystery religion God. They want to make him Dionysus. So yeah.
And that story doesn't comport with Paul at all, because the Pauline theology, because the guy responds and says, but Master, I kept all the commandments since I was a child. And Jesus didn't go, wait, it says in Romans that no one can do that. So no, you haven't. Right. Well, that's what happened. The fellow, the rich man, returned. We find this in the Gospels. That the rich man said, but I kept all these commandments, like not committing adultery. Jesus doesn't go, no, you can't. No one could do it. He doesn't suddenly come Ray Comfort and the street preacher. Like, right. Why doesn't he do a Ray Comfort on him? No, he does. So And then Jesus goes, okay, here's what you need to do. So the guy has accumulated a lot of stuff. He said, I need you to sell everything you have and give it away to the poor. So what Jesus does is he then creates a new commandment that doesn't exist, which no one's going to do. And then the men walked away, all shook up. So it's interesting that repeatedly the Gospels don't care about Pauline theology, even though that same chapter, Mark chapter 10, will later on in verse 45 speak about Jesus being our ransom. He's the only thing that could save you. So it's not that Mark did not adopt vicarious atonement. He very much did. That's why these stories that are distilled in the Christian Bible are disconnected from each other. You could have the guy saying, I kept all the commandments, and Jesus doesn't go, you can't do that. Paul would have said that, right? Hebrews would have said that. But Jesus goes, all right, then I'm making up a new commandment, sell everything. Well, no one, that's very much like a Sermon on the Mount kind of thing. Well, you have heard, you should not commit adultery, even if you, in your mind, so then you've done it. Well, that makes it impossible. So that's the same story there. It's very much like, where did that come from? So that's part of the story. No one can do it. This is why Christianity is a religion that has to be respected as you'd respect North Korea. I didn't mean that in a bad way. Actually, I did. But the point is that this is where the high comes from, that you're a sinner, you're worthless, nothing you can do. Bingo. Very well said, Neil.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that to me, that's like, I'm not, I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but like, that's a defeater. That's just like, how do you explain that? If you want Jesus to be the eternal logos who's been there from the beginning, who knows all things, then why is he telling people that he's not good, but God is good? And why is he getting baptized? And why is he sacrificing his life and his blood and being a sacrifice like the lamb, which doesn't even make sense? If he is God, right?
Why I mean, let's just be very naked about this. Like, why is he going to God, why did you forsake me? When he said that he tells his followers that actually he's going to go to Jerusalem, he's going to suffer, and he's going to get killed and suffer many things. And Peter jumps up and said, far be it from you, Lord. And Jesus says, whatever. Like, why are you saying so? The stories don't fit with each other. Each piece, each module operates independently, but they don't conform with others. They're different authorships that are just melded together, sewn together, and each one is sewn together as a unique module. So they don't fit together. They're all over the place. How could you have, Matthew saying on the one hand that Jesus is the ransom, but telling us the parable of the sheep and the goats? How
Right.
could Luke be telling us about the
And
prodigal son? Like, that
that's what
doesn't
doesn't make sense. And that
fit.
this is what I'm trying to get at is like, if he is the sacrifice, to who? Because if he is God himself, is he sacrificing to himself? Like if this is some sort of like what am I trying to say? What I'm getting at is this: the Messiah, the literal word Mosiach means anointed. It's
Mm.
God's chosen savior. It's not God. Isn't there two different people here? What? Right?
Well, the word Mashiach means anointed, and it doesn't tell us in Tanakh that he is a chosen savior anywhere, but
Okay.
rather he is the one who instructs the people. He judges people, and people will listen to him very carefully. Zechariah 9:10. I mean, gosh, if the New Testament didn't end with Zechariah 9:9, rejoice over Zion, your king comes on a donkey, the foal of an ass. If they just didn't stop short, the next verse says, and that he will speak peace to the nations.
That's a good
All
point.
then.
Good point,
That's
because the soter is the common trope in all these mystery cults, the savior, which
right.
is what we've been getting at is like a lot of these attributes that Christianity puts on the Messiah that are not in the Old Testament are usually found in like Dionysus or Attis or somewhere else, Mithra or something like that. The
Mhm.
soter, the savior, and and it's a lot different than with the messianic promise of who the Messiah is supposed to be.
But
It's this
right,
God man Greco-Roman idea, like just sort of imposing itself on top of these Jewish messianic prophecies.
right. Maybe I can lock it up this way.
Sure.
We wanted to say Christianity versus Judaism. We might say it this way: Christianity is man's effort to create God in his image. Judaism, in contrast, is God's effort to create man in his image. They're exactly the opposite. Christianity is wants to produce a man God, the perfect man who you will never be. The message in Judaism, the Messiah is relatively unimportant. He's certainly going to come, but
Right.
the point is, it's about God, and that's why if you like, no one would read the Hebrew Bible and go, "I think I should worship Abraham." As much reverence as you have for Daniel, this lovable person, but you would never worship Daniel like that. No Jew ever did such a thing because you'd be put into an insane asylum. It doesn't make sense. Now, whereas we know the doctrine of the Trinity was developed in the second, third, and fourth century, but we could read the Christian Bible and go, "Oh, I see where this is going. Where this is going." I mean, it doesn't surprise us. Interesting point, incidentally, is that the point you raised was very much on the mind of Tertullian, who we mentioned earlier, the church father from Carthage. In that Tertullian's shaping the Trinity, to come up with the word Trinity, what motivated him? What motivated him was the modalism that was rampant, the Sabellianism, the notion that Jesus was just a different mode as the Father, which means that the Father suffered. And Tertullian mocked this and thinking, "Oh, you think that the Father created everything could suffer? That's not possible." I talk about that in volume 1 of Let's Get Biblical. That's
Right.
just not possible. So, in fact, the point you raised, that it's inconceivable that God could suffer, that's what motivated Tertullian to forge the idea, the doctrine of the Trinity, with the word Trinity, although Tertullian's view of the Trinity was not orthodox and would develop further. Origin would refine it higher. And then ultimately we would come to the fourth century, and that will become the official doctrine of the church. Absolutely.
That is just that to me, that's case closed. I mean, I don't know how you can get around that. That's just it defies logic completely.
And why would Christians argue about it? If what we're told by missionaries that the doctrine of the Trinity is explicitly in the Old Testament and New Testament, they say this all the time.
I know.
If I am making this up, please stop watching me.
Right.
Okay, just shut this down. You know I'm not making it up.
Yep.
So Christians say that the doctrine of the Trinity is explicitly in the Old and New Testament. Okay, certainly in the New Testament. Okay, well, if that's the case, then why were Christians arguing about it so much? Like, they didn't argue about the virgin birth. There were no ecumenical councils convened to decide whether Jesus was born to a virgin or not. Why? Because it does say it openly in Matthew and Luke. It really does. The reason why Christians were fighting and killing each other over the nature of the deity of Jesus, because it's not in the Christian Bible. I mean, I encourage people to just
Yeah.
contemplate this. That's why they were fighting.
And check this out. And this is the last thing I'll say because it's even worse than that. The only verse that even gets close to a Trinity in the New Testament, obviously not the Old, but the only verse that comes close to there being a Trinity is 1 John 5:7, where it says there are three that testify. But this is the crazy part. There's no ancient Greek manuscripts that have this added verse that these three are one: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. It turns out that this verse shows up in the mid like 13th century Greek. It doesn't even exist. And you can look through any of the manuscripts that are out there. It's not in there, which means that
Erasmus refused to put it in his first
yes,
go around. He said, I don't see it in any Greek that was in Latin manuscript. He said, I don't see it anywhere. And people were accusing him of Erasmus was a real genuine scholar,
right.
and I mean first class scholar and Roman Catholic. And he said, I'm not finding now he didn't have many manuscripts to work with. I mean, imagine if he had all the manuscripts we have. I mean, what did he have? I mean, he had from Basil, he had so few manuscripts that he was working with that he actually didn't have manuscripts at the end of Revelation, and he had to borrow manuscripts, or he got them from Reuchlin, or he actually there was some parts he had no manuscript to. He actually had to back translate Latin. But the
Right.
point is exactly correct. Erasmus is confronted by. He said, "Just show me a Greek manuscript," and one was tailor made for the occasion. And in his second publication, that's where you find the Johannian comma that you're referring to in 1 John 5:7. Why was it added? Because it wasn't there. Absolutely correct.
And that is just tells you what you're dealing with, what type of church this is, what type of institution, what type of religion this is, that they have to pull things like that off to make their points.
Right. Right. Exactly. But that's what happens when you. I know it sounds kind of sunny.
I know.
I wish I didn't like Christians, but I care about them
Me
very
too.
much.
Me too. Me too.
And because I care about them, like, right. So that's what happens when you have an evolving theology where you're changing doctrines. You have problem with all the relic of your past. You have well documented texts in the Christian Bible that portray Jesus completely subordinate to the Father. You have to rework all that, and then if you can't find anything, just make it up.
Yep. And this is the last thing I'll say. I like Christianity. I do. I like the religion, but it needs to be honest about what it is. It's a Greco-Roman mystery religion. It's not the true Judaism. It doesn't fulfill Judaism. It's a totally separate religion. And if it actually, which is this will never happen, but if it actually admitted that, I would love Christianity. Just be in your own lane. Like, don't be like, oh, the Jews are the problem. You get a lot of anti-Semitism coming out. Look at the whole entire medieval uh, Catholic Church and Inquisition trials, all the horrible things they did in the name of con- thinking that their religion was the true religion. You know what I mean?
You know, I'll say this. I'll tell you a story, a very quick thing. I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism as a kid. I mean, just nonstop in Brooklyn in the 60s and 70s. It was just unending. I was thinking this week about running away from Anthony. I don't know. He was definitely a Roman Catholic kid. Anthony, I guess he was Italian. What do I know? And Anthony was running after me with some big thing that he wanted to beat me with. And I was just a little Jewish kid running away from Anthony. And I didn't know where this was going because he was much bigger than faster than me, and I was in a lot of trouble. So he's running after me in Borough Park, Brooklyn, with this big thing. I think it's something that's a little cardboard thing to beat me with. And suddenly the mother screams out, his fat mother screams out, Anthony, at the top of her lungs, stop, get inside. Okay. And Anthony stops pursuing me and turns around and goes back home disappointed that the mother caught him. So the thought that came to my mind at the time was, holy smokes, like his mother, like saved me from this. Like, I don't know what would have happened to me if Anthony's mother. So, and what will happen to me as I grow up and I'm an adult and Anthony's mother is not around to stop Anthony anymore? More, what does my future look like living in a Christian world such as this? That was my thought. And thank goodness I had Anthony's mother to rescue me. What will happen when I don't have Anthony's mother? There's no one to stop Anthony. But then subsequently, I began to think about this. Why did Anthony hate me? Why did he call me a Christ killer? What He didn't invent that. He wasn't born that way. You're not born a bigot. That came from the home. So
Yeah.
really, I thought of Anthony's mother as my savior at that moment. I thought, "Phew, thank goodness for his fat mama saved me." But then I realized, where did he pick up this stuff? Where would he come up with this kind of stuff? From his home. He didn't invent this. And that was the point. Christianity breeds this stuff. It breeds it because of the storytelling in the Gospels of how the Jews are portrayed as the enemies of God, as the worst people who know the truth and deny Jesus anyway. And when the Roman soldiers say, "Hey, Jesus rose," that means he's gone. The priests and elders didn't say, "Oh, okay, I guess we'll become Christian." They said, "Let's bribe you. Would you say that you fell asleep?" The Jews are constantly conniving, evil, and that's where you get the protocols of the elders design, all the anti-Semitism. It's bred in the New Testament. So in order for Christians to change their way, they have to jettison the entire Christian Bible.
Yep. I mean, Hitler himself had, I'm a true Catholic and I'm following the way of Jesus, who is the real fighter of the Jews. That's in Mein Kampf. Like this ideology can have major impact and major hate coming from it.
I
And
read through Mein Kampf twice because I quote it in my books. Okay, so I say if you think what Neil is saying is sort of like is mischaracterizing, please go online. You can get Mein Kampf online
check
free.
it out
You
for
could
yourself.
please just do Control F. That's a search. Okay, and just look for Jesus or Christ. Just do that. Okay,
Yep.
none of it is going to be. All of it is going to be favorable. It's not what you're being told.
Right.
And yeah, Hitler was baptized in the Catholic Church and the whole deal.
Yep.
And his right, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I always love having you on. And is there anything else you want to tell anyone? Books coming out? Anything you got going on?
Well, I'll be speaking in the United States in November, and the videos are available on my channel, which is my name, Tovia Singer. And I thank you very. Oh, and we're going to see each other in Jerusalem in
Very soon.
October.
Very soon.
Holy smoke! Well, what more is there to talk about?
Right.
We're going to all be together in Israel, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And you have attained true gnosis.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ועת נעשה